Heartbreak is not just about losing someone. Sometimes it is life tearing apart the illusion you were living inside. There's a strange moment that happens after every deep emotional loss, a moment nobody prepares you for. The room is quiet, your phone stops vibrating, their name slowly disappears from your daily routine. And suddenly, you are left alone with a version of yourself you haven't met in years. Most people think heartbreak is only pain, but that is not the real tragedy. The real tragedy is realizing how much of your identity was secretly built around another human being. Their validation became your peace, their attention became your confidence, their presence became your emotional home. And when they left, it felt like parts of you disappeared with them. But what if heartbreak was never meant to destroy you? What if it arrived to expose something deeper? Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious." Maybe heartbreak is the moment life forces you to finally see yourself clearly. The attachment, the fear, the loneliness you kept hiding beneath love. Because sometimes the people who break your heart are not villains. Sometimes they are mirrors. And tonight, we are going to uncover the deep psychological lesson hidden inside every heartbreak. The lesson most people never understand until it changes them forever. Part 1. Heartbreak reveals the version of you that was begging to be loved. Heartbreak has a terrifying way of exposing emotional truths you spent years hiding from yourself. At first, you think you miss them, their voice, their presence, their messages at 2 a.m. The way they made ordinary days feel alive, but as the silence stretches longer, another realization begins to surface beneath the grief. What truly hurts is the feeling that you were not enough to be fully chosen, and that wound is usually much older than the relationship itself. Most heartbreaks are not just about romance. They awaken ancient emotional memories buried deep inside the human psyche. The fear of abandonment, the fear of rejection, the fear of being emotionally replaceable. That is why heartbreak can feel disproportionate. You lose one person, but emotionally, it feels like losing your worth, your identity, your future, and your sense of safety all at once. Heartbreak does not create emotional emptiness. It reveals the emptiness that was already there. That is why some people cannot let go even after being treated badly, because the relationship was feeding something deeper than love. It was feeding emotional survival. You see this everywhere in modern life. A person checks their phone every 5 minutes hoping for one message. Someone replays old conversations in their mind before sleeping. Another person keeps stalking social media, not because they are obsessed with the other person, but because their nervous system became addicted to emotional validation. Love slowly became anesthesia, and heartbreak removed the drug. Nietzsche once wrote, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." But heartbreak destroys people when they made another human being their why. This is the lesson hidden beneath the pain. You cannot build your identity inside someone else's hands and expect to remain whole when they leave. Real healing begins the moment you stop asking, "Why did they leave me?" and start asking, "Why did I abandon myself while loving them?" Because many people lose themselves slowly in relationships without realizing it. They shrink their boundaries, silence their needs, accept less than they deserve, pretend not to be hurt, pretend not to care, all to avoid losing someone. And ironically, that fear is exactly what destroys them internally. Heartbreak is painful because it forces you to confront the relationship you have with yourself. The person leaving was only the trigger. The deeper wound was always within. And perhaps that is why heartbreak changes people forever, not because they stop loving others, but because they finally realize how little they loved themselves. Part 2. Some people enter your life to break the illusion you were living in. We rarely fall in love with people exactly as they are. We fall in love with who we imagine they could become inside our story, and that illusion can become dangerously powerful. At the beginning of every emotional attachment, the human mind starts creating narratives, tiny fantasies, future memories that haven't happened yet. You imagine growing old together. You imagine healing each other. You imagine finally becoming happy because this person arrived. But slowly, without noticing, you stop seeing reality clearly. You begin loving potential instead of truth. This is why heartbreak often feels shocking. Not because the signs were invisible, but because your emotional attachment kept translating reality into hope. You ignored the inconsistency. You excused the distance. You tolerated disrespect. You waited for effort that never truly came. Not because you were foolish, but because the fantasy felt safer than the truth. The philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer believed that desire distorts perception. When humans desperately want something emotionally, they unconsciously reshape reality to protect the attachment. And heartbreak becomes the violent moment where illusion collides with truth. Suddenly, you see everything clearly. The mixed signals you romanticized, the emotional unavailability you tried to heal, the bare minimum you called love, and that realization hurts almost more than losing the person, because now you must grieve two things at once: the person and the future you imagined with them. That is why heartbreak can feel like mourning a life that never even existed. You were emotionally attached to possibilities. Modern life makes this even worse. People fall in love through screens, imagined futures, carefully filtered personalities, and temporary emotional highs. Social media teaches people to confuse intensity with compatibility, attention with love, chemistry with emotional safety. But chemistry alone cannot build peace. A fire can warm you, or burn your entire life down, and many heartbreaks happen because people become addicted to emotional intensity instead of emotional stability. Carl Jung once said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul." Sometimes we chase impossible relationships because they distract us from ourselves. The emotional chaos keeps us occupied. The uncertainty creates obsession. The inconsistency becomes psychologically intoxicating. You wait for texts like a gambler waits for reward, not realizing your emotional world is slowly becoming controlled by unpredictability. And then one day, the illusion collapses. The person leaves, or betrays you, or simply reveals they were never who you believed they were. And for a moment it feels unbearable. But hidden inside that devastation is a brutal gift: reality. Heartbreak forces you to finally separate fantasy from truth. It teaches you that love without clarity becomes self-deception, that attachment can blind intelligent people, that loneliness can make humans romanticize emotional crumbs. And perhaps the deepest lesson of all is this: the wrong person often enters your life so you can finally learn what real love should never require you to sacrifice. Because real love does not demand that you betray your peace to keep someone close. Part 3. Heartbreak forces you to meet the self you kept avoiding. Most people think heartbreak destroys them overnight, but the truth is more unsettling than that. Heartbreak removes distractions, and suddenly all the emotions you buried beneath the relationship begin rising to the surface like ghosts finally demanding attention. The loneliness, the insecurity, the fear of being forgotten, the emptiness you kept escaping through attachment. When someone is constantly present in your life, they can unknowingly become emotional noise. Their messages fill the silence. Their affection numbs your anxiety. Their existence gives structure to your days. But when they disappear, silence enters your life again. And silence has a terrifying ability to reveal truth. Blaise Pascal once wrote, "All of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone." That is why heartbreak feels unbearable for so many people. Not because solitude is painful by itself, but because solitude exposes everything unresolved within us. This is the stage where people usually panic. Some rush into another relationship immediately. Some obsessively seek attention online. Some drown themselves in work, parties, or endless distractions, anything to avoid confronting the emotional void underneath. But heartbreak has a hidden purpose. It interrupts the emotional patterns you were unconsciously living inside. For years, maybe you defined your worth through being needed. Maybe you attached your happiness to external validation. Maybe you feared loneliness so deeply that you tolerated emotional suffering just to avoid being alone. And heartbreak forces all of it into the light. This is why painful experiences often become spiritual turning points, not because suffering is beautiful, but because suffering strips away illusion. The ancient philosopher Lao Tzu once said, "When I let go of what I am, I become what I might be." But letting go is terrifying because humans build identities around emotional attachments, around routines, around people, around stories about who they think they are. And heartbreak shatters those identities. Suddenly you are no longer their person, no longer the one waiting for their messages, no longer living inside the emotional role you became attached to. And in that emptiness, a strange question emerges. Who are you without them? That question changes people forever, because eventually, if healing truly begins, something powerful starts happening. You stop chasing distractions. You stop begging for closure. You stop romanticizing pain. And slowly, you begin rebuilding yourself from the inside instead of depending on others to complete you. You rediscover forgotten parts of yourself, passions you abandoned, dreams you delayed, boundaries you never had the courage to create before. Pain becomes awareness. Awareness becomes transformation. And perhaps this is why some people look completely different after surviving heartbreak. Not physically, energetically. Their eyes carry more depth. Their boundaries become stronger. Their intuition sharpens. They stop confusing attention with love. They stop settling for temporary emotional highs because heartbreak taught them something life rarely teaches gently. Being alone is painful. But abandoning yourself to avoid loneliness is far more destructive. And sometimes, the person who walked away unknowingly gave you the greatest gift of your life, the opportunity to finally become yourself. Part 4. The Hidden Gift. Heartbreak is life rebuilding you into someone stronger. There comes a point in every heartbreak where the pain doesn't necessarily disappear, but it changes shape. It stops being sharp. It becomes clear. And in that clarity, something unexpected happens. You begin to understand that what broke you was not only the loss of a person, but the collapse of an emotional structure you were never meant to live inside forever. At first, you tried to hold on to it. You replayed memories like they could change the present. You questioned every moment like answers could undo reality. You blamed yourself, them, fate, anything that would delay acceptance. But life has a quiet way of forcing truth forward, and truth, no matter how delayed, always arrives. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." Heartbreak is exactly that kind of paradox. It breaks you, and in doing so, it rebuilds you. Because beneath the emotional collapse, something subtle begins to shift. You start noticing patterns you never saw before. You recognize emotional manipulation more clearly. You feel your self-respect returning in small, quiet ways. You begin to understand what you will never accept again. This is not bitterness. This is wisdom forming through experience, and slowly you realize something profound. You are no longer the same person who entered that relationship. The old version of you was searching for completion in another human being. The new version of you begins to understand that wholeness was never meant to be outsourced. This is where transformation truly begins, not when the pain ends, but when meaning emerges from it. You stop asking, "Why did this happen to me?" And you start asking, "What is this trying to teach me?" And that single shift changes everything. Because now even your memories lose their power to control you. They become lessons instead of wounds, experiences instead of chains. You realize that love was never the problem. Attachment without self-awareness was. And perhaps the deepest truth hidden inside heartbreak is this: people don't break you. They reveal where you were already fragile. But revelation is not destruction, it is invitation. An invitation to rebuild your boundaries, to reclaim your identity, to stop negotiating your worth, to stop shrinking yourself for connection, to start becoming someone who no longer abandons themselves for love. And one day, without even noticing, you wake up lighter, not because you forgot, but because you understood. And when understanding arrives, suffering loses its authority over you. You still remember them, but they no longer define you. You still feel the past, but it no longer controls your future. And in that moment, you realize something quietly powerful. Heartbreak didn't take something from you. It returned you to yourself. So if you are going through heartbreak right now, understand this: you are not falling apart. You are falling into awareness. And everything you are feeling, the confusion, the grief, the emptiness, is not proof that you are broken. It is proof that something inside you is being rewritten. Because the deepest lesson hidden inside every heartbreak is not about love leaving you. It is about you finally returning to yourself.